Salutations, greetings, welcomes, whatever introductory words you want to use. This is episode number 33 of the Creative Outlet Podcast. My name is Brandon, and the person that I'll be talking with today is my newer to the series compared to me co-host, who is named...
This is Tyler, aka Boom. Glad to be here. Glad to be gabbing.
And we are 4 episodes into your tenure now, because, that's the confusing thing with numbers. When you start with a number that's a 0, but it's still like you're 1, if that makes sense.
This is just part of the remake series. That's all it is. We're the next generation of your previous podcast is Star Trek. Let's put it that way.
Yes. As I titled it in episode 30, I believe, the next era, the current way that we're going to be doing things. Today is January 31st, 2025. This is the rare month where you get to have 3 podcasts recorded in one, because that's just how the weeks split themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stuff have you been up to lately? I figure that's always a good way to start out your conversations. Keep it casual, right?
Keep it casual. The big thing for me lately has been actually chipping away at my... I previously mentioned on the podcast the games I wanted to beat for this year, and I have been deep into Unicorn Overlord a lot lately.
That's that Fire Emblem type-ish game. Or I guess I should just say strategy RPG, because that might be a little bit more, broad, not just characterizing it like one particular game series.
It's the easiest way to compare it, but it's nothing like it, is the best way I can put it out. The thing is that when you have a game like Unicorn Overlord, there is much more, diversity in its combat. So the best thing that I can explain about this is that it's very a la, typical fantasy RPG. You're, the lost heir of a kingdom who has to go around the land, and you have to try to recruit a liberation army in order to free the land. And what is not told about it is that the combat is kind of borderline like RTS, like real-time strategy a little bit. Instead of, your units all being, their own individual thing, you get units in the sense of small groups of characters to put together in, and those groups move together on their own, and then you're timed on the overworld. So if a level says, oh, you have 5 minutes to beat this, it's not telling you, oh, you have 5 minutes to finish this whole thing. It's you have 5 minutes in the overworld to finish, liberating all these posts, all these capture points and all this stuff. And your units can go anywhere from, what I found out, anywhere between 2 to 5 people per unit. And you get 10 of those over the course of the game. So you get effectively 50 different soldiers to fight with through the course of it. There are 70-ish that you can recruit, which is insane to me. And I am still working on trying to recruit everybody to this point.
So when you say you have 5 minutes to do something like that, is that to say you have 5 real-world minutes, or you have 5 in-game minutes to do this?
5 real-world. So the timing of it is still something I was kind of getting used to up until earlier this week. And I realized it'll give you a limit of time for the overworld. When you actually engage in combat and all that stuff, that does not add into the time. It adds into only the time when you're in the overworld, having your units move around and going to capture points or going to fight against other units. Once the actual fights are taking place, the timer stops. The best way I can describe it is it's the chess clock. You are timed to make a certain amount of moves through the course of the game. So once you made a move, you hit the timer, it stops. It's the kind of the opposite effect, where you're making moves, the timer keeps going, and then you fight, and then the timer stops, and then it keeps going after the fight's done.
So it's very, that's interesting, because when I think of strategy RPGs, I suppose I think of you're allowed to really, really plan out your decision, and that's not to say, obviously, you aren't planning at all, because you have to be, but you really are put into, I guess it makes it a little more realistic to there being a war, so to speak, because it's not like things in war just stop until the other entity, or the other combatant, I suppose might be a better word, makes their decision.
Right, and it's not that you have to be pressured in your moves. It's more just you have 5 real world minutes where things are moving in order to get the job done. But like there are ways to pause the game so like you can plan ahead with your movements with your units. Say like you're trying to move like say 6 units, for example, all across like different parts of the board. It's not going to force you to try to do this while the timer's ticking. It's like you can pause it and then let them all be like, okay, this one's moving there, this one's moving there, so on and so on. And as long as you haven't unpaused it, time still stays still for you to be able to adjust these moves. But once the moves are made and you're actually like letting them go, time is now continuing on for you to actually beat the game level. And that's the other thing, is it's like you will lose if you run out of time on there. Like that's a very weird thing I've never experienced in an RPG like this before, but it's really good. And the combat is all done automated in a way.
Oh. See,
So
I feel like that would be really good for keeping up a good pace too, you know? You're not just there and you're waiting for things to happen. You're just like, okay, this level's going to be done. It's going to take 5 minutes. In reality, it's going to take longer than that in the sense that you might have to take multiple attempts at the battle, but that's about the only way that it's going to take longer. Like the one battle itself, the successful run, is going to be in that 5 minutes or less or more, depending on what chapter it is, I suppose.
well, and it's more going to be like you're going to still be doing like, realistically overall time, like maybe 15 to 20 minutes per level, just so that you're kind of still making the choices and all that stuff that matters. But it is nice because you can also reset the level if something goes really wrong, or you can even like bounce out and go back to the overview map. If you realize late you don't have to, or you don't want to take this fight because maybe you're under leveled, for example. There is like a lot of grace period with this game, so it's not like you're forcing it. What I do like about it is that there is actually some freedom in the campaign of it all. When you first start, you get like this handful of units that's all like kind of split between like 1 or 2 small-ish units. And then as you progress, you start to unlock new characters as you start fighting certain people. And then there's even other people who like you'll recruit through conditions being met. That's where a lot of that kind of comes into that a la Fire Emblem style, where it's you're figuring out the ways to recruit them. Early on, a lot of the recruitable characters are pretty easy to get into your army. There are some of them you need a certain character, and if you did not recruit them for whatever reason, you will lock yourself out of another character.
Oh, that's fun. Oh, man, I don't like that. I can't. I mean, it's annoying that you can't complete your collection because you already screwed it up, but then you're not being able to complete it because you've missed other ones earlier. It compounds upon itself. That's interesting. That's kind of devious in a way.
Okay, but now here's the thing, and this is something I genuinely like about this, because this is something that Fire Emblem would never consider at that point. There is a thing that you can do which lets you hire mercenaries in the game, and they are of all the different classes in said game, because there's quite a few different classes to actually do. The trick is, if, say, you don't recruit every one of the single characters, which is, fine, especially if you're doing a blind playthrough, you don't know who's recruitable necessarily. You can kind of put 2 and 2 together for certain ones where it's just like, oh yeah, that guy makes sense. Oh, that guy makes sense. There is a thief that if you do not let him go after one mission, if you kill him instead or send him to the guards, whichever one it is, you lock him out permanently. He has to be released in order to be recruitable later. So there's also some delayed gratification in that sense. But let's say if like you get to the post end game, or not end game, but like kind of near the end of the game. Let's say you only recruit maybe 40 of the characters. You get 10 units with 5 characters each. So you still have 10 empty slots. You can use mercenaries to fill those slots up and still level them up as if they were recruited characters. The only difference is they won't have like the story element attached to them. They will just be able to be like characters you can fulfill what you want in your army. So let's say if you want like an archer, but like say one of your archers that you could have recruited died, or like you just didn't get it because XYZ reasons, you can recruit an archer at like one of the forts and be able to use him as if he was just a character you got normally. It would just cost you a little bit to actually start him up, but you still can recruit him and level him up and even upgrade his class as a normal character you recruit in the game.
It gives you the same kind of gameplay bonuses, I suppose, you get out of having them, but you just lose some of the interest of how do they play a role in the story. And I do think, though, that's something to consider, is that your game world is maybe being a little bit less enriched because you don't get a certain character story, you just get generic McGeneric character.
Right, and that's just it. Is it's like they want you to be able to beat the game and give you the resources to have enough of an army in order to beat said game. Because what's nice is, unlike Fire Emblem, where like there's kind of a not economy, but like there's a build path, so to speak, in some cases where they want you in some, like even in the older games, they want you to level up your character through the lower class first and then upgrade it so that it resets at 1 and then it becomes max level as the new class that you unlocked it as. In this, they don't give you that stipulation. It's, oh no, this character is just at level 1. You can upgrade them whenever you're ready, and they will still be on the same build path. They'll just have increased stats because you upgraded that class. Like, an example is like the main character becomes like this like horseback lord riding character. He's still the same character, he's just got added boosts now to that second class that he didn't have previously, and like will get increased stat buffs as well after he becomes the upgraded class. The units you use that you do recruit do not lose their level ups, and like essentially you can kind of just keep going. Like it encourages you, if you have a way to increase their class or like rank them up in that sense, you will be able to still progress the story as normal. It just means that, okay, you have these classes now at your disposal, which is really good in a lot of cases. Like, one of the ones I'm still working toward is they have like these crossbow units where if they're the lower class ones, they're effectively like archers with like some minor healing capabilities and DOT attacks. If you level them up and rank them up, they become this class that has a big shield in addition to all of that stuff, where they're able to use guard proficiencies, which is really cool. There's so much elaborate stuff with these classes that you can do because it doesn't kind of funnel them all into like a box when you make them those units either. You're going to be able to be like, we have this unit that is like got this set of skills that we gave it, basically. Like if you recruit like a story character. What's cool is if you go into their stats and everything like that, it will tell you these are the proficiencies that they're more inclined to work, and you can actually work with those. So it's like if someone is a more offensive focused as one, and let's say more of an evasive in the other, they're probably going to be more focused in getting higher offensive stats and evasion stats, but they're going to be lower in, say, like defensive proficiencies and stuff like that, or HP even. So you can kind of build your characters around how they're getting those experience points from the get-go. And then as it progresses, you can find like the right items and the skills that they have that they can prioritize. Oh, that was the thing I was going to mention. So the combat is all done like without your input during the fights. They will act accordingly based off of the skills that you pick, because there's AP and there's PP skills that you can use, where AP is like action points and then PP is like passive points, and they get a set limit of each of them at the start of the fight. They can get more from like various things, or they can lose some from various things. But in general, it's like they can get anywhere between 1 to 4 depending on level, class, build items, etc., etc. And you can also adjust what their skills that they have are, and even go as far as like, here are the conditions I want you to use these skills in this order, if that makes sense.
It sounds like they really do try to make sure that you can have things done in the way you want them to, in the most efficient way that they can be done, and while also giving you kind of a base to start with. And that's something that I appreciate too, because I'm thinking about, and it's funny because I'm going to bring up this game specifically in one of the topics that we have here. I'm thinking of some of the RPGs, like people love Dragon Quest III. It just had its remake. And maybe this makes me weird, but like I don't really like picking classes and all that stuff for my characters. I like to just get the party. That's going to be my party, and that's what it is. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if that just makes me weird or boring or I'm overthinking it, but I guess I'd rather just know I have a balanced party and I'm going to be able to do with it what I want. And so it looks like you're already given some stuff when you start this, but you're just allowed to then mold them in the way you want, as opposed to, all right, you start from scratch and you have to craft the entire thing like you're sculpting a figure. I don't know if that's the best metaphor or analogy I can use, but you get the idea.
I mean, it's kind of in that boat, because, like, the thing is that, like, when it comes to, like, the skills and the conditions, you have full control on when it's being done once you actually look into their loadouts, and that was something I'm still learning, and I'm, like, maybe halfway through the game now that I'm still trying to fully understand it myself, because basically what they're doing is it's like, okay, you get these abilities and skills for being in this class, and they're going to do this in a certain priority like order. You can do, like, with the archer with the shields, for example, you can have them use their, like, toxic bolt as their opening one, and then their passive ability will follow it up with a quick reload skill, which lets them shoot a second shot that's not poison, but it will still shoot a second shot. So your timing of everything will also kind of fall into it. And it has, like, kind of an initiative system too, like a D&D in the sense, where, like, the higher the initiative, the faster they'll be. It's essentially like turn order based off of, like, a regular D&D campaign in that sense. But you have to be kind of aware of what you're doing, and sometimes it's better to be slower, it's sometimes better to be faster. It really depends on the units that you're using. And then to even go a step further, and I promise this will be the last thing so we can actually talk about what we're talking about today, there are items you can actually get that allow you to not only change the appearances of everybody, even the recruited characters that you get, but they also will let you change up how they build up their experience and stats are. The one where, like, say if they're, like, offensive in the first level and then they're focused on evasion in the second, well, what if I want somebody who's more of an all-around person? You can change those as you see fit too, because, like, when you go into there with the item, it lets you change those if you want to change one or both per use of the mirror, and it's like it's a consumable item effectively, and there are very few of them, but you can recruit or have their, like, entire recruitment experience stuff be differently how they should play in your eyes. So, like, say if you were using that same archer, if I want to be more of this all around but faster unit instead of being more of an offensive and evasive focus, I can switch both of those and it will change the build path accordingly for, like, the experience points. So there's so much into this game that, like, even I'm still fully trying to get a firm grasp on everything. Like, I do not have my characters optimized in the slightest, and I am still trying to figure that out also. I found, like, there's this one class where it's essentially a knight that's high magic defense, and they have an ability that lets you, when they need to get healed, you can actually have them take half your health and give it to that person. And then I partnered that with items and weapons that basically are vampiric in sense, where they will be lifesteal items, and then they recover their health back from their actual active points. There's so many ways to build and go around these, and it's, like, such an elaborate system that I really will probably be playing this game again and again at different points just to try things out differently. And then even the story, it's like there's a point where, like, they give you an option of, like, you can do either this or this, and you can actually, like, decide which way you want to go, and it doesn't impact the story heavily because you're going to do both anyway. It doesn't matter what order you go in, though. It really just depends on, like, okay, I'm going to go to this place first to get these units first, and then I'll go to this place second, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot of it's giving you all the choice that you could want, but they're all meaningful. It's not a matter of just giving you, like, you know, you can just make your unit this way, but it's still going to funnel you into the way they had it originally. It's, you have a basis, but you get to build off of there. You're given the core, you get to sculpt around the core, not you have a core, but it's a very intricate core where it's like, there's really only one way I can take this, isn't there?
Yeah, it's early on it's pretty straightforward. Like you think, okay, this is how I'm going to build it. But then once you really get into the nitty gritty of everything, you have much more freedom than you even realize. And that's the thing that I really like. And on top of it, because Atlas has a stake in this game too. I think they were I don't remember if they're the publishers or what, but it's got really good side story content with like these conversations between the units. And this is the part I really enjoy. You don't have to have all like 70 members be friends with each other. You can just get the handful of people that are going to have actual side content lore purposes. You can make them be the focal point, and you can learn more about them through their support conversation. You are not forced to be like, oh, I have to get this with everybody and have like a certain thing. Like certain ones only have like one, certain have three, some have two, but like you don't feel forced to go and fish those out like in a Fire Emblem game in some cases, where if you want to like get all this side content and like know how this person operates or this person operates, you can kind of do it at your own leisure because they gain organic rapport from fighting in the units together, but they also have like ways that you can do it via taverns where you can have certain characters eat with each other and they get rapport through that. There's a lot of freedom where I don't feel like I'm forced to have to go fish for side content before I get to a main quest line. It's, oh, I really wanted to do this and now I can do this at my own pace too. Like if I want to just max it out because I had like the money to do a few meals at a tavern and max out that relationship, I can do that. If I'm not really caring about it, I'll organically get there too. So there's a lot of good in this game, and this might be a top 5 for me, like overall game.
That's interesting. It's a way of building side content in through the main content, if that makes sense.
Right, and like you get like all the, like there's more to the game. I mean, I've already been talking way longer than I wanted to about this. I just really love this game. Like I'll probably talk about this more once I'm officially done with my run of this game. Like when that's done, I will go into way more in-depth details with like stories, what I like, what I don't like. But like it's so well done, and like I still think it's hilarious that this game felt like it kind of flew under the radar even for an Atlas game. I think this is like one of their better games in general because this like ticks so many boxes that I as a video game player really enjoy. And I'm going to tie this in before I completely forget because I thought this was hilarious because I found this out. My buddy has been playing it too recently, and we were talking a little bit about it. He got a special edition version of the game. Do you know what it came with?
I remember seeing this game marketed. I remember seeing some of the initial trailers, but it's not really in a genre that I consume, so I wasn't looking at the special editions. So what is the big time amazing part of the special edition?
I'm going 4 for 4 on this topic. Not even intentionally. There is a card game as part of the special edition. It's a full-blown card game that they included in the special edition version of the game.
Guess I got to add another tally to the the card game mentions.
I had no clue this was a thing. I was looking on Amazon because this was on there, and I was kind of looking into it. It had what you would expect for like a special edition. It has like, here's like the soundtrack CDs, here's the art book, there's a special edition case, par for the course in special editions, and then there's a full-blown card game. They give you a full-blown game with your game.
Man, that's I
still can't believe
I can't think of a lot of other special editions that go above and beyond in that kind of way.
Right. And I looked into the game because I was talking to my buddy about it. It's like a 2 to 4 player, fully fleshed out card game. I don't know if it's like a deck builder though. I don't like know too much in depth with it, but like it's a full blown game that they just give you as part of it that you can play on the side. Like if you're not playing the video game, you can just play the card game with friends. That's insane.
Hey, you don't like our game. We gave you another game with it. So, you should still be happy. Surely you're going to like one of these.
Probably. I mean, if you didn't like the game to begin with when it was initially coming out, I don't know why you'd buy the special edition. But I get your point. But yeah, I genuinely think Unicorn Overlord is a game that if you're an RPG fan, definitely worth looking into. It is probably going to be one of my top 5. It may be even higher than that, and that is already really hard to do because I have like a very I would say set in stone top 5. I would say at least set in stone top 3, and this is making a really good push for it.
Somehow, I suspect when we get to our wrap up episode for this year, it will be making an appearance based on this conversation.
It will, but I think we're gonna get a more fleshed out episode with like my thoughts on it. That might be a topic for a later episode, like later in the next few months once I'm done with it. I'm probably just gonna make that my topic and just be like, look, this is really something special and people should look into buying it. Like I have already talked to so many of my friends. Like one of my coworkers at the station I work at is another like big Atlas fanboy because he likes Metaphor, he likes Persona, all those games. I keep telling him you should buy this because this is like right up there with those games.
Well, and maybe this will finally be after, however many years of existence and many good games they've made already. Maybe this really will be Vanillaware's breakout title, the one that makes people go and think of them as like this big time amazing dev. Even though they've already done plenty of good work, it's just when you're a smaller dev, sometimes those games that you do kind of fly under the radar.
Right. Okay, so we've already talked way longer than I was intending to. This was supposed to be a different topic episode for me, so let's get moving to the actual topics.
All right. So, I kind of previewed this. I've got this good thing going where I'm thinking about something and I'm like, oh, that'd be a great thing to talk about as a full proper topic, so that I'm like, well, it's not like there isn't another episode coming, I may as well do it, right? So I mentioned last time when we were covering some, I hesitate to call it breaking news because it's not technically breaking if it's a day old, but for the purposes of this show, it's breaking news, which was the reveal of the Switch 2. And I commented, I would have been so much more infinitely excited for it if there hadn't been leaks. And really, I'd been thinking about this issue for a long while because I remember last year there was that June, I believe it was June, Nintendo Direct. And there were leaks about that along the way where it's like, this is going to be the one and they're going to show off Dragon Quest 3 HD. Oh, and they're going to reveal, spoilers, we've been working on Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D this whole time too. And I remember reading that and thinking, there's no way. And similarly, they're like, there's going to be a new Mario and Luigi, and there's going to be Ace Attorney, and there's going to be some kind of Donkey Kong game, and Fantasian, which is Hironobu Sakaguchi's like latest game. It was an Apple Arcade thing first. It's going to get its console version, and they're going to show off remakes of the Oracle games, the Legend of Zelda Oracle, like of Ages and Seasons. Those are all going to be coming out. And I remember reading that and I'm like, man, that just seems so, like, some of this stuff I could kind of see. Other stuff here seems very not necessarily realistic. And lo and behold, in some way, shape, or form, all of these things that I mentioned came true. And maybe this is just a me problem, but for me, that makes things so not fun. I guess I don't know what your experience is, but to me, having all that stuff like revealed before it comes doesn't make it as interesting.
I think for me, it's one of those situations of like, as I get older, I'm not as like inclined to worry about leaks because it's like, I'd rather know what I'm getting into ahead of time, but I don't know if I fully disagree with like what you're saying either because they lose a little bit of the wanderlust in a way. When there's a bunch of these leaks and they're saying like, oh, this is what the Switch 2 is going to have. Here's the specs. Here's what's planning for it. Blah, 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 blah. It's going to be backward compatible. And it happens so much with like games, and Switch 2 was a good example of all this. Like, when they finally announced it earlier this month, it felt really upsetting, like in the sense of like, oh, well, we lost kind of that wonderment of the initial release, but in the same breath, I was also very relieved seeing some of the stuff that they did say when it was leaked to be correct, like the backward compatibility. So I was already excited about that because like leaks have two problems with me. Is one, if they're leaked to be true, you lose the wow factor a little bit. But on the flip side, if there's a leak and it's not true, you're disappointed. So it's this real stupid catch-22 situation where like you're going to be forced into either being upset that it got spoiled or you're going to be upset that it's not there. There's no like, yeah, I'm so thrilled. It's like, aside from the backward compatibility thing, I think I really do feel similarly to you with the Switch, at least, and how that all went. So like, I get it.
I think about the only way you can come out of a leak feeling kind of positive about it once it gets confirmed is if it's something where you're like, thank God they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my case, when I think about the Switch 2 in particular, finding out all the details about it didn't really matter to me because it had all been leaked. It was more a situation of, because I remember talking a long while, okay, maybe that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, a couple years back, and one of the topics I did was, let's just kind of round up now that we know what's going to be the case for the PS5 and what's going to be the case for the Xbox Series X. Let's just kind of round up what are things looking like in the 9th generation. And I haven't listened to it in a while, but from my memory, one of the things I remember talking about in it was each of these systems has a way that they need to be like, we are that system. Sony is, we are the VR system and the SSD system, and we're going to show off creative ways that our games use this. Oh, and the DualSense system. I don't think I mentioned that at the time, but I had kind of under thought about how valuable the DualSense would be as well. You know, we're the controller that has the haptic triggers and all that stuff. Xbox had to be, and they haven't been really doing so well in general lately, but they should have been the, you can play just a ridiculous amount of games on our system. And what I said for Nintendo was they've had this problem over time of we do something good and then we just kind of screw it up with the next thing. It's kind of like you talked about last time too, that it goes in cycles of something really good and then something really not good, or something really good and something that's only kind of middling in comparison, like the DS to the 3DS. The 3DS is a great system and it was very well appreciated. But, you know, it also was the thing that followed the DS, which is, if not the best-selling system of all time, it's the second place behind the PS2. I can't remember which one's which on the top of my head. I'm pretty sure the PS2 is still barely beating it out. But the point I'm trying to make here is, what I had suggested is, if you're Nintendo, you got something good with the Switch here. Just, I'm not saying, you know, necessarily follow in the footsteps of Sony and Microsoft and do the equivalent of do this again with better power. You know, you still want to find that twist. They always do that characteristic twist, but this needs to be like the mold. And you put actually really, truly interesting twists in it. And seeing that they did that, and in the hopes for me of like, okay, this is going to be a more like equal system to its contemporaries, even though I know it's going to be less powerful on the whole, right? Just knowing that it's like, okay, we've been struggling to get some of the more recent, bigger releases in the last few years because the Switch is so far behind the PS5 and the Series X. Okay, now that we're going to be moving forward with some better hardware, they're going to be able to catch up again. Thoughts?
No, I think you hit a lot of the nail on the head. That like I can't really rehash on that. What I'm hoping the Switch 2 does and what Nintendo does correctly with this system is just, you know, we don't know what the launch titles, if any, will be for the Switch 2. Because realistically, when I heard that they were backward compatibility, to me that makes it sound like we don't really need launch titles at the start because it's just improved hardware at that point. I'm not saying they won't, and I'm sure they will at some point, depending on, you know, what's the proper release window for it. And I'm sure they're going to do kind of like what they did with like the Wii U to the Switch and the GameCube to the Wii and that sort of thing. They'll make updated versions of certain games, but will also be playable on older Switch consoles probably. But like, I think the backward compatibility thing is still going to be the one thing for me that I would genuinely enjoy the most, where I don't feel forced to have to buy an additional game. I only spent $400 that its supposed going price is for, instead of like 460, 470, whatever it might be for a new one. So for me at least, I'm excited still regardless of what ends up being decided. If they come out with launch titles, I'll probably grab something. If they don't, I won't feel like I'm gypped in that sense either, because I will still be able to play all of these older games on there. So until I can actually start buying games for my Switch 2, I still have the rest of my Switch library I get to go through on improved software, or on improved hardware, I should say. And hopefully that also means that these games might even be better in that aspect too. Because I think I had mentioned this in a previous episode with what we were talking about, is I'm hoping that means that if I play Pokemon Scarlet, for example, on Switch 2, it will run better. It will run like we wanted it to run. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It may still be kind of the clunky mess that it was at launch. I know there have been improvements over time, but like I'm not saying that it's fully fixed by that comparison either. But either way, it's still going to be something I will hopefully get. If the timetable is anything to go off of, it will be a happy birthday for me, because it's literally coming around supposedly around early June, which is my birthday.
It's funny that you say that, because one of the timetables I've read is that it's coming around in August, which is, when my birthday is. So I guess either way, maybe one of us is going to be having a very happy birthday. It's going to come now
in July, just to spite us.
Yes, just to become perfectly in between, and then neither of us are having a celebratory birthday console launch.
Right, and I think this is going to be still really good overall. I think this is not going to be like how it has been with Nintendo consoles, where it's like one really, really good console that succeeds, and then the other one just it performs below expectations. It really is going to determine on like the benchmark that they're suggesting the sales will be, because that's where I'm worried that Nintendo's going to go wrong. Is they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to expect even more sales for the Switch 2 than the Switch, and I'm like, you might want to lower those expectations just a scooch. It's going to be more expensive. You're going to have to really push people to actively want to buy this version of the Switch instead of keeping on to their old ones. My gut is that it's going to be a much better system, without a doubt. My worry is going to still be the sales numbers at the end of the day, because maybe they'll hyperinflate what they were expecting, and people aren't going to necessarily start buying it out of the woodwork like the Switch was. The Switch was different. That was new. That was fresh. That was not the Wii U. There's a lot of things that were going for it at the time of release. But now we're 10 years out of it, which still feels weird to really think about it. And now we're at a point where it's like, okay, we need to give them a reason to abandon the current Switch to go get the new Switch. And they're making a good case so far. But the numbers need to also be realistic in the sense of, remember, you are not going to be Switch numbers out of the gate potentially. You could, but be prepared that you aren't. That's what I'm saying on that one.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, and I'm going to use this story as the way to like close this tangent and go on to the next part here. But I got a message from a pal of mine sometime last week, and he says to me like something along the lines of like, yeah, that Switch 2 reveal was like a whole lot of nothing. So then I made my case. I'm like, well, I think it would have been more exciting if there weren't the leaks here, because it's like, what is there to reveal when you've seen the whole thing leaked to you already? But even then, obviously, I mean, that does not compare to the rooftop trailer. Remember that for the original Switch, where people are like on a roof playing Mario Odyssey and at a basketball court playing NBA 2K or whatever? Like, that's exciting because it's like really showing off the concept and how it can work. But one of the things that he talked about, I pretty fundamentally disagreed with, was he's like, we only got to see Mario Kart, and it's like, it's fine, but I'm just confused why it's your mainline launch title. And I'm like, well, it's only been the best-selling game on the systems since the 3DS for sure. I think the Wii, well, it would be the Wii if you don't include Wii Sports, because you'd get Wii Sports with every single console, right? So I'm just saying it might not be as exciting, but it's still interesting. To me, it's just deflated because I would have thought it'd be more cool to wrap this up on specifically the Switch 2 here. It would have been more cool to see like, oh, it's in that color, and the sticks or the insides, the color like the original Joy-Con, has got this extra button and all that stuff. That would have been more interesting if someone hadn't already put out pictures of that before the reveal.
Yeah, I think had they maybe timed this out a little bit better. Like, you had all these leaks and all these reveals already online. Putting out the trailer wasn't the problem. It was, we have to wait 2 more months essentially now to get actual info on this. And it may be stuff that already came out during the leaks too, which is very possible, but...
See, I slightly agree, I slightly disagree. I don't mind having...
I wasn't finished with my point, but I...
Well, I'm just saying I don't mind having to wait until March for like April for like the full complete reveal. But if this teaser trailer has been in the can for a while, when you're seeing these accessory makers come out and be like, yeah, at CES, we're just gonna like, have images of this thing in our accessory, you gotta be like, okay, we need to move this up, because otherwise we're gonna lose the excitement by these people who are just associated with our product instead of getting people excited about our product.
Yeah, and I think that's more what I was trying to go for, is it's like, had you maybe moved up when the direct would be, I'm not saying it had to be like a huge amount, but maybe like, we have like a 3-month gap essentially from the trailer release to the actual direct that's going to talk about it. And that was confirmed in the trailer. I think they should have pushed that up a scooch, or they should have released the trailer later, just so that it kind of has more of that excitement factor being able to be waited for. Because 3 months is a long time. Yeah, you announced the Switch 2. People are going to get excited. This is an industry, though, that is like, ooh, shiny, will always get the attention of somebody else. If you lose that oof shiny factor, as I'm calling it, it's going to be harder to sell that product until, when it actually... Realistically, the only way that I would sit here and be like, oh my god, they're doing things like correctly, and I'm using that word kind of loose on this, is if after the direct they finish talking about everything, talking about their upcoming games, and like, oh, by the way, we're going to have this available for release next week. Something to that extent. That's the wow factor that they would need, I feel like, on that level. Because it's like, yeah, kind of like what we had talked about before, where it's like, give them a couple months to do their, press tours and proper events that they're showing this off at, and then put it out for mass sales from all these different places. But at the same time, the ooh shiny factor will be harder to really reel people in if you let it go for too long, which is why I think like showing the trailer wasn't the bad idea. When it was is going to be very important timing, and the same thing goes with the rest of this release schedule. Because, like, my hope is that they do really well with the Switch 2. I'm not saying that's to do exactly as good as the Switch, but get close. As long as they get close, I think they're fine.
Yeah, I guess I just disagree because, for one, it was a similar wait time between that rooftop trailer I mentioned, because that was, like, late October, early November, and then there was that big January presentation where it's like, they actually did, like, I couldn't believe it, a presentation as opposed to a... direct. So I'm not opposed to waiting a little bit to get some information. I just think, like I'm saying, if you're out there and you're seeing publicly people talking about, we're going to show this off, just bite the bullet and show off the product. Like, it's only going to help you guys. Like, the only reason, in my opinion, to hold it back is if it's literally not ready. And I would similarly caution, like, I see what you're saying with the thought of like, oh, we're going to put it out next week. But unless they've been actively working with retailers on that already, that was the thing that doomed the Sega Saturn, was that they, at E3, they're just Sega was casually like, yeah, and it's going to be out in like a short amount of time, and retailers had no idea. Not that I think Nintendo would do something that stupid when Sega's already done it in the past, but I think it's a fair point of caution to bring up, and an interesting piece of game history trivia.
Right, and I wasn't saying like it has to be like, oh, this has got to be next week. I'm saying it's, you got to really keep that timing heavily into consideration, is all I'm saying. You don't want to lose the hype when you're still getting like some stuff sorted out, or you're still trying to get like a bunch of this stuff figured out and all that other stuff.
Well, or maybe you do like social media posts along the way about things that are interesting but don't have to be revealed in the presentation. Like you talked about the backwards compatibility. I think because of the similar form factor, it should be assumed that that's there, but that's something where it's just like, hey, just so you know, it's backwards compatible, and now people are thinking about that already. I'm hoping you see a similar thing with, like, obviously it's a Switch 2. Guess what that means? NSO is going to return, and that means all your games that you already have, if you have a subscription, are staying along. So you're not going to get the same kind of, like, we're still going to continue drip feeding games, and you can, people can be mad about that. But it's not like you're starting from scratch and, oh, here's Super Mario Brothers again. Here's, The Legend of Zelda again. Here's that and these games that we've already re-released 4 different times. But I'm just saying, I think there's multiple ways to get around that idea. But trying to look at the bigger picture now, why do leaks make things not fun? What is my argument for the case that it's like leaks just make things not fun? And it's funny because I mentioned the show last time, right? The Completely Unnecessary podcast. They talked about a similar thing in an episode. Actually, I think it was when they were doing the E3 2017 kind of coverage, because they were talking about Super Mario Odyssey when the trailer starts and you see the dinosaur and suddenly Cappy's on it and it's like, oh my god, Mario comes out of it and it's like, you could be a dinosaur? They were like, well, why would you reveal this? Think about what a huge surprise it would be as a player to, once you've started the game and you get into the Cascade Kingdom, and it's the second kingdom of the game, right? And you go like, oh my god, I could be the T-Rex? I see where they're going with this, and I don't disagree, but I think if they're going to make the case that like tons of trailers and tons of coverage showing off stuff like that, or they kind of bemoaned the like where there'll be things where it's like, we're going to show you the first 20 minutes of the game. And I can see where they're coming from in the thought of like that kind of that could decrease the hype for some people. But I think in this case, something like a console just, being shown off and we're just supposed to like, oh yeah, that's that. But, we haven't had the proper like official reveal, or we just get told like, yeah, this is a thing, and then we find out that it's a thing, and instead of being surprised, like, I feel like that kills the hype even more than, we know this thing exists, here's a piece of information about this thing. Being spoiled about the interesting thing existing, to me, kills the surprise more.
Sure, I totally understand that.
And the funny thing, too, is in some ways I have to be upset more at the game's media than anyone else for this, because I'm not on much of any social media. I just don't care that there's a whole lot of political rigmarole going on with a bunch of different social media platforms. That's its own can of worms. I haven't been interested in being on social media way before any of this stuff happened. So it has nothing to do with that. I just don't care. So, but the point I'm trying to make, then bring that up, is it's like, I'm not seeing the posts from, gamer, I don't know, come up with some random like social media handle out there that seems like it belonged to this kind of person.
At totally not leaks on .com.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not seeing his post about like the South Korean Games Rating Board, which rates these things really early compared to other entities, has just put out a listing for some game that you didn't know existed that would be really exciting. Mario Golf, but it's not going to totally suck like Super Rush in some people's opinion. I thought it was an okay game. It's a whole separate discussion. I just don't think it was. I think some people maybe overhype how bad it is. Not that I want to overhype how good it is, because it's just kind of it's okay. It's perfectly acceptable as a game.
It functions.
Yes, I'd say it's a little better than that. It's a fine enough game. If you want to play some arcade golf with Mario characters, you will get that, but it's not nearly as good as like Toadstool Tour.
Oh yeah, I'd fully agree on that one.
Digression over. But then I go on the websites. I go on to, I don't know, GameSpot or Polygon, and there's the article about, yeah, like you said, whatever that person that you came up with title is on social media, yeah, they posted about this, so, who knows, maybe it's happening. So you can't even avoid it. And because I also then start thinking about the back in the day kind of times too, back the pre-internet, which, God, I'm going to sound so much like old man yells at cloud, even though I'm younger than you.
Dude, I've been doing this probably longer than you.
I know. I'm just saying.
Bitching on the internet couldn't be me 10 years more here.
Right. I guess I don't remember in 2011, and granted, I guess this wasn't as big a thing then, and certainly not even earlier than that, but I don't remember people just traipsing the databases for like the rating boards and going on retailers just to look at the listings as much as they do now. I think it's one thing if you're just Joe Schmo and you've gone on Walmart Canada's website, because I'll just say you're a Canadian, for example, and they have their listing up for the we've used the Switch too much. Let's say this is 5 years from now, or God, I'd hope it wouldn't take 5 more years, but we'll say 3 years from now maybe, and we've got the listing up, the generic listing up for the PlayStation 6, and even though Sony hasn't announced it in there, or hasn't announced these yet, there's the listing for Wolverine 2, because the first Wolverine that Insomniac's supposed to be working on still hasn't come out, and God of War in some other mythology that they haven't done yet, which is funny that I use that example, because that was something that you considered talking about, was they were going to do Egypt, so yeah, I mean, but they haven't revealed it yet. Like, okay, it's one thing to be the person and just stumble upon that. It's another thing to be the person who stumbles upon it, and then you have to get your megaphone out and announce that to the whole wide world when maybe they wanted to be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think you lose some of the magic of that surprise because of that. And I mean, yeah, there's obviously something to be said for, okay, they could just keep that under wraps better, but you have to assume humans are going to either be incompetent, or in the case of, like I mentioned with a rating board, like I think another one that's really early about releasing that info is New Zealand, if I recall. Like, you got to kind of plan around some stuff like that to an extent. I'll get out of my old man yelling for this moment and let you comment.
I was going to say, just to kind of quick add into that, I think the only reason on the New Zealand train is because they're so much further along time-wise. So, like, if something comes out at 9 a.m. New Zealand time, that's effectively middle of the night for us.
Well, but I mean more like, this game isn't going to come out for 7 months, and they haven't announced it yet, and they'll already have a rating board post about it.
Yeah, I fully understand. I get that sentiment 100%. Like, that is not lost on me. But no, I sympathize with a lot of what you brought up, too.
I also think, to use that phrase of there being some magic, there's some magic behind something that I've talked about a handful of times in the show previously when there are leaks, which is something's not real until it's real. I could have, in June, been like, oh my God, they're going to do Ace Attorney Investigations Collection, and we're finally going to get Investigations 2 in a proper, like, official English localization. And then what would have happened had it not been revealed to be real? I would have been, like, incredibly disappointed. And that's the other problem, is you get these leaks that are real, but it's within the same sea of all the leaks that are not real. And then you've got people just hyping and hyping and hyping and hyping, and then unless they just happen to be on the one that's the real one, then they're disappointed. And it's like, well, you had these expectations that aren't realistic because there's no reason to assume that this leak is true. Why are you assuming that it's true? It's not real until it's been revealed.
So I'm going to be as abruptly quick with this, so everybody is aware of this whole level of situation. Journalism is a very, very fluid industry, and it really is important to be right and accurate versus being like the first to report it, I feel like. So for me, at least, and I'm gonna use some of my personal example here on this one. When I was working at Shack News, back as an intern in college, it was always important to be correct first when it came to source, or not sources, but like stories. So I wanted to be able to be aware of that. And as I've gotten older, I value that specifically in general, is I want accurate information when I am reading something. That's why I feel like when it comes to leaks, I'd rather these be confirmed by the initial source. Like, I want Nintendo to be the one to tell me, like, all this stuff is happening with the Switch 2, for example, versus I'm hearing about it from some Joe Schmo on the internet, where his literal source is just Trustboro. That's it.
Right.
So,
well, and you know, that was something like in college, I considered going for a journalism degree for a period. And a big part of that is similarly, just from a personal sense, I hate chancing things, if that makes sense. I hate being in the mindset of, well, you know, maybe this is what's happening. No, I want to know. Just let me know. And so in a similar way, I think that's one of the alluring things with that industry as someone who's like that, is it's just like, I want to hear this from the person who knows the information. They're going to tell me what it is. And that's why I get similarly on here. And I'm not trying to rag on all gamers and be like, you guys are dumb here or whatever. I completely promise it is not that. It's just like, man, we get a little carried away sometimes, thinking like, this is going to be like this. And it's just like, let's find out what the person who knows is going to say before we get all excited about something and then we're disappointed. I'd rather have, like, because I want to be in the discussions about the Switch 2 once I know stuff about it.
Mm-hmm.
God, how many posts or articles did you see out there leading up to, like, people are talking about they want it to be like this, and it's like, I don't care, because we don't know that, we didn't, you know, it was very possible, even though obviously the signs very well pointed to what the reality is, but it was very possible that we were going to get something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the point of doing all this speculation on something when it's not even going to be that? So I think it's just important to be responsible with what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
It's not to say you can't have fun. I understand the fun in speculating on things, but people can get so deflated after the fact. And it's just like, you brought it on yourself, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's, you put this expectation on and you kind of self-fulfill prophecy yourself into saying that this is real, so that when it comes out and it's not real, you disappointed yourself. And that's something that you shouldn't be doing in general when it comes to leaks. Leaks are not credible all the time. Leaks can be credible. That's not the issue. It's, they have to be in a much more like confirmed capacity before that we can really say confidently, like, yeah, this is actually a proper bit of information that we're getting from XYZ.
To kind of put a bow on that last point, I think back on a game that, you know, I'm not saying this because I want to defend the game, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's not that amazing of a game either. But, you know, remember back in 2020 when Super Mario 3D All-Stars was revealed and people were all like, why didn't they have this or this or that? And I swear, I can't remember the source. I can't remember if I heard it in a video or if I read it in an article, but I remember somewhere a leak of some kind where people are talking about, this is their, you know, later in the year, there's going to be an announcement of a 3D collection and it's going to have all the old games in it except for 3D World. So it's like, then people are expecting Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Super Mario 3D Land to be in 3D All-Stars. And I agree with their disappointment, for example, in Super Mario Galaxy 2 not being in Super Mario 3D All-Stars. But my disappointment is on the basis that it's not in there. It's not on the basis that I thought it was going to be in there, and it's not. I think there's a line there. Maybe it's a very minor line, but I still think it's a relevant line to think about.
No, I fully agree.
And, you know, last time, because when I had written my, like, original notes going back to when I was talking about the June stuff there, I noted that it's like, I said, leaks make things not fun. And last time I described it as leaks make things so boring. And I was thinking about why would I have chosen these different words? Because those are kind of different concepts. And I thought about it, and it's like, well, boring, that's where you get into like the no surprise. Others can become bored because they don't meet their speculation. And I kind of want to go think about the flip side now and really just to drill down into like, why is it not fun? Because you're also, like, if you're the person creating this, all this stuff that you've done up to this point, you were building up to like, all right, we know the date. It's going to be, in the case of the Switch 2, it's going to be January 16th. People are going to find it out, see the reveal, and it's going to be so exciting. And then someone goes ahead and leaks it. Everything that you build up to now, wasted. I mean, the work obviously isn't wasted because they're still going to bring out the product, but like that feeling of excitement that person had is dashed. They're completely deflated. And sure, they make a lot of money. Sure, they're making a product they really want to. But in the same way that we as the consumer want to be excited by the reveal, those people as the creator want to see that. That, gives them a lot of excitement themselves. I look back on, there's this video by Maximilian Dude. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all.
I'm fully aware of Maximilian Dude.
Great. So you'll know.
I love watching his content.
Great. You'll know what I'm talking about here. But I remember, because, obviously he's a big fighting game person. But then it's like randomly something that I wouldn't have expected out of him when it's like, I just see all these fighting games. It's like, he loves Final Fantasy VII. And he talks about a story in, I probably saw this in a compilation video of like a bunch of the times where he was like, this might have been like the timeline of Final Fantasy VII. And he tells a story of like, I wore the jacket that a bunch of the devs had when they were making the original game. Because somehow he must have gotten one from maybe like a person who used to work at Squaresoft of America or whatever, and he was invited to one of the intro or like one of the media or influencer type events where it's like you can come in and see the developers. And he noticed that like one of the directors just kept looking at him. He's like, and eventually he goes to talk about like, where did you get that jacket? And then he tells, like, when they're talking about it and they get a picture together, and then he tells Max, sometimes when we're working on the game, or like as the team's working on the game and we're in the office and we're just like, oh man, like something's just going wrong or things are sucking for whatever reasons. Just like general working is just not being fun sometimes. That's how it goes, right? To boost the team's morale, we would put on videos, including yours, where when you saw the reveal of our game, you were like over the moon. You can't, when something's leaked and people feel deflated about what they've seen because they already know about that. And granted, not everyone's recording their reaction to these things, obviously, but you're not gonna get that. You're not gonna get the wall of posts where people are going, oh my God, wow, that's so cool. And you're not gonna get the videos where people are that excited about it, because there's going to be a percentage of those who are like, oh, that thing is real. Cool. And then that's it. And then as a creator, you don't necessarily feel like your work has been valued as much as it could be. And that's not to say that like everything that people make is amazing in every way. Like sometimes when something's revealed, people react that way because it legitimately might not be something that's going to end up being a super duper well-reviewed product. And that is what it is. But when it's something that definitely you can expect to be exciting, if I were the person creating that and I saw that reaction, I'd be devastated. Well, and I think the only like last final thing, and then we can finally move on to what your topic, this has been a long one for me, is I'm frustrated because I just don't know how to combat this. I like coming out of topics when there's something that I see as an issue with some kind of idea of, well, if we did this thing, maybe then we could solve the issue. And I can't think of any way to come out of this, right? Like, even last time with Paper Mario, I was like, even though I was critical of it, I was like, here's some ways that they could do things that I think would work better. But for this one, I'm just drawing a blank. Like, I'm not coming up with, like, how do you stop someone going on a random ratings board and seeing, oh, this thing is being rated, I guess it's real, and then they post about it. You can't stop that, and I wouldn't want to stop that, because people should be allowed to make those posts. Or similarly, how do you stop the folks in game media, even if it could be seen as a little irresponsible because they're reporting something without complete confirmation? There's an allure to being the first one out with that info. And if you are right, then you look like a genius. Of course, if you're not, then you have the opposite going on and you look like an idiot.
I'm not a genius.
Right, I'm the anti-genius. But they're going to do it anyway, because there's also something to be said for they want clicks. If you're a website in particular, you want clicks. So, and there's curiosity. People want to seek this stuff out. So I can't think of any way out of this. And I hate to be kind of the downer on this, and maybe this is a topic that doesn't really have much like big relevance in the bigger, wider world, but it's just something that has really gotten to me because I want to be excited for stuff. Life, the everyday life, can be really boring as is. So when we're talking about your thing that is supposed to be your fun thing, when it's not giving you excitement when during moments that should be exciting, it's not fun or as fun anymore.
I think to kind of put a bow on this topic so we can kind of move on, I think it's not really our job, as kind of lackluster of an opinion this might be. It's not our job to be the ones who make or break leak news and like find out whether it's real or not. I think as casual fans, I am okay with leaks coming out to a degree as long as it's not like this blatant like absurdity stuff, because I would rather find out that it's like, oh, this is actually right, versus, oh, that wasn't even close to what they said it was supposed to be. Leaks at the time can be accurate for one reason or another, but at the same time they also may change things after said leaks come out, maybe because, oh, they don't want this to be a thing. Like maybe it got a bad rap when it was initially leaked and they were probably thinking this was a good idea. Turns out people hated it. Leaks are kind of a necessary evil in a weird way, because it's like it gives them feedback in some capacity, and it gives us feedback in some capacity what they're planning. So I want to be optimistic. Like, I'm not saying like leaks are always going to be inherently bad. I do agree that they're not fun. I do agree that it does kind of remove some of the magic of like when you would sit and see a new game trailer kind of thing and someone already had leaked the trailer like months ago. The best that I would do, and this is more what I've done up until this point, is like I just ignore a lot of it. If I see a leak about like, oh, Switch 2 leaks, confirm these, blah, 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 I don't care. I genuinely don't care. It's like, I'm going to find out from Nintendo. They're the ones that are making the system, not Joe Schmo from the middle of nowhere, Idaho. I would rather be surprised at an initial release, yes, but it's like, if I happen to catch some info by accident, maybe it's like a stray bullet of some type, I would rather at least know that it's like, oh, this is actually right. Well, that's pretty cool. And like, your excitement shouldn't be tied to a wow factor, I think. It should be excited that you want to buy this product. For me, the Switch 2 is going to be a product I want to buy personally, and I'm going to be very excited when it comes out and once we learn more about it as, the months progress and all that. But I think at the end of the day, we're never going to find a solution to the leak problem. It really comes down to people not actively searching out for this information, just because we're a very curious group of animals at the end of the day. Like, we want to learn, we want to know more by default in a lot of cases. And there will be people that they want to get it out because maybe they just want attention. Maybe they want people to be aware of what's coming down the pipeline. Maybe they just are dicks. There are a lot of reasons to be a leaker.
They're just a meanie head.
Yeah, they may just play spoiler the entire time, and that is a possibility. But I think at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to this whole front of, if you don't want to find out leaks, just do your best to ignore them. As tacky of advice as that will be, it's better to at least make an effort and kind of let yourself get that surprise organically, because at the end of the day, you control what you read. You're the one that controls what websites you go to and all this stuff. If you see a headline that says new details about the Switch 2 and you didn't even know that was a thing, you can immediately ignore it if you really want to. So you can at least be like somewhat surprised that I was like, oh yeah, the Switch 2 is coming out. It's like, well, at least they kind of confirmed it, but I don't know what's all going to be part of it. And, we've talked about that for the last couple of episodes about the Switch 2. We're both excited, I think, to say safely. So I think at the end of the day, it just needs to be, do what feels right for you. If you don't like leaks, don't read them. Try to avoid them as best you can. Don't go online. Don't, go on social media. Don't go to places where they can be very easy to find. If you don't want something ruined for you, don't go to those places then. Like for me, like I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I am not a very big horror movie person by any stretch. I don't like the genre personally, just because I don't see the appeal of sitting down, watching a horror movie, and having the crap scared out of me for like an hour and a half. That's just my personal take on it. That said, I will sit down and read Wikipedia articles of plot points for like really well-known horror movies. Not because it's like I plan to watch them and have them spoiled for me. It's like because I got friends who like a lot of horror films, and I would rather be able to hold a conversation about it, know what they're talking about, and let them talk about something that they're passionately. And it's a little one-sided to have a conversation, but I would rather at least have that be something that they enjoy. And it's the same thing for me when it comes to leaks. It's like I am avoiding leaks as best as I actively can unless there's like a major publication that just finally found out something was confirmed. If my friends are going to talk about the leaks, I'm going to let them. I'm just going to shrug my shoulders and say, I don't know what to expect. I haven't seen anything recently. And if they want to show me, I just tell them, no, I'm okay. I'll wait until so-and-so comes out with the actual info. I'm not trying to ruin their fun. I'm trying to just keep it fun for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think kind of similarly to put a bow on it, maybe then the problem becomes a level of obsessiveness. People become obsessed with needing to know this. I have to know this. And, we need to step back. Life goes on. There's other stuff to worry about too. And, feeling the need to put out this information about there because you know it and I want other people to know it can be a little obsessive, and then people just get really caught up in, I need to talk about this thing because I want it so badly. But there's other stuff. There's other things happening in life too. There are sports, there are art, there's art going on, I guess games are art depending on your perception of it. I would argue they're art, but it's a whole
that topic.
That's a whole separate conversation too.
I will be bringing that up on a different day. I actually love that debate more than you realize.
Oh man, that's going to be fun. Even though we're on the same page. But the point is, there's other things happening. Until we know about something, just like, it's okay to let things happen. It's okay to just like think about something else. We don't have to have 50 billion posts about what could this thing be like, when it's like, we're going to find out. So just let it happen.
All right.
Anywho,
I'm going to make an executive decision because the last couple of episodes we've had, as much as I love that we've been talking for 2 hours, we've been talking for like 2+ hours. So I'm going to defer my topic for the day that I was going to talk about and save it for next time.
Ooh, bold decision.
Well, so here's the thing. I talked a lot about Unicorn Overlord. I just looked at it and said, you know what? Let's make that my topic for today. And I'm going to finish it by saying this. Go play it. Go find a way to play it. It's on multiple systems. The weird thing is it's not on Steam. That feels weird. But that's aside.
That is weird.
It's on like Xbox and PlayStation and Switch. It is not on PC. And I am really confused by that decision. But like, if there is a console that you have that can play it, go play it. Digitally download it. If you can find a physical copy, even better. I had to scrounge for a physical copy personally on Switch, no less. And I'm very happy that I own it. It is a wonderful game, and I will talk about that till I'm blue in the face, and I am sure later down this year, when I finally fully beat it, I will be ranting and raving about how amazing that game is and what I liked. And if there is anything flawed with it, I will go into more detail on that. But I think that's good enough of a topic for me. We've talked
Fair
about
enough.
we've talked about Unicorn Overlord. We've talked about leaks when it comes to video game news. I really like where today ended up actually. I think that was a real good healthy discussion with a good amount of skepticism and understanding, I think.
I agree. Would you like to, since I've been traditionally so far previewing things that I'm talking about, and I don't have anything to preview for next time. I haven't fully decided what I'm interested in discussing in episode 34. Would you like to since you have your notes already here, would you like to give a preview, like an idea of what what listeners can expect to hear in episode 34?
Our audio viewers.
What you got?
Okay. So my initial topic I was going to bring up for today that I'm going to say for next episode is I want to raise a question of how long is too long for a video game franchise. And when I say that, I'm not saying it's like the longevity of like how long it's been since it, because I'll go more in depth with notes because there are games that have been around like as a franchise since the 70s, I found out. And I'll get into that more in depth later. But the question I want to have answered from your perspective and my perspective is, at what point does a video game franchise need to kind of be like riding off into the sunset? Like when you hit that point of like, maybe we have too much that we're doing. And like, what is like kind of criteria to say, hey, this is a franchise that's just not as popular for whatever reason. It's not really one of those franchises that like has the same luster as it used to. I'd even go as far as like looking at some of like the even today popular franchises. What's keeping them relevant? Why are they really good franchises? What keeps them, relevant? And I have a list of quite a few franchises, and it spans genres. It literally goes from things like sports games to popular, like really well-known video game franchises to educational games. There's a lot of franchises that have been around for a long time, and it literally stemmed from this article that I found on the Gamer that was talking about these like really long-running franchises. Some that I never even knew were that long to begin with. Some I've never heard of. And I'm going to keep it like next time to what I would argue is franchises people will know. There may be one or two that like maybe they're not familiar with, or maybe they've heard in passing, or even like maybe you've never heard of this before. But these are ones that I've picked out specifically to kind of illustrate, I think, both sides of the coin on this one. Because I wanted to bring it up as like, what do we have to do to keep franchises relevant? Or in the same breath, what do we have to do to keep certain franchises from really jumping the shark or getting to a point of maybe you've overstayed the welcome a little bit? And I have some very controversial picks when it comes to certain elements of those. And this is also going to be a thing for the next episode. There are going to be some very weird factoids that I went down a rabbit hole when I was researching this that I was not aware of. Because when I would think of like a franchise, initially when I asked this question, I was thinking strictly mainline games. I was severely wrong. And I'm going to get more in depth on that, but like you're going to learn some things that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't. But I learned a lot of things that I wasn't prepared for that I think are really interesting when it brings up the topic of how long has this franchise really been going for, and should it still be going for?
Those numbers balloon once you get into the spin-offs, don't they?
I'm going to put it in this perspective to give you context. One of these, I won't say which, has over 450 games in its supposed franchising.
Internet sleuths, there's only so many game series that could be that. Can you guess what it is?
You will be surprised by some of the numbers on here, because I'm going to tell you this one for free too. There is a very specific popular current franchise, as in has been around since after 2000, that somehow has, let's see here, if I'm doing the math right, 42 games.
42?
42 since 2007.
That's a lot.
I'm not going to tell you which, but you can get an idea if you want to find out for yourself. And I will get into this. But I learned a lot of interesting things. And this one's going to be a freebie. we're going to talk Pokemon a little bit in this episode, and
Oh boy.
I found out the level of spin-off games that franchise has had in under 30 years, which includes Sega games. And yes, I had to double check. There are Sega Pokemon games. Just, I hope when you edit that you keep that pause in, because that was like, I could feel your brain trying to process the word Sega and Pokemon in the same sentence.
I kind of similarly in the last episode when I had a pause, I cut a little bit of it out because you still get the idea with the pause, but something to be said for pacing.
To give you context, that was one of those situations I just kind of sat there and I'm like, I really broke him on that one. That is a real thing that's happening.
It's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it, to think about there being
like
Sega Pokemon games.
Like, realistically, if you think about it, it kind of tracks a little bit. Not in the sense of like, oh, Sega made Pokemon games because, one reason or another. We have to remember that there are Philips CDI Zelda games. So Sega Pokemon doesn't really surprise me in that aspect. But yeah, there's a lot of like these franchises that I am genuinely shocked by that have been around as long as they have. Or they have these really obscure things. And another one I'll tease for the next episode. Do you know that Resident Evil has 18 mobile games since 1996?
I'm kind of torn on how to feel about that one, because in some ways that's actually not that surprising to me. Find out in episode 34 why, though.
Yeah, so giving you context with everything that we have here, there's a lot that goes into a franchise. But what is the point of having that franchise if we're getting into really weird stuff? Because before even asking this question, my assumption when it came to a franchise was strictly like main game titles, the mainstay series. Like when you would see a Call of Duty game, for example, you knew it was a mainline entry, that kind of thing. But like certain franchises like Pokemon, you really start to realize the scope of what they have when they have how many spin-offs in those games. And even like certain games that have like, even if you're just counting the mainline entries, it's shocking sometimes at how much that actually goes. There's a franchise that like I haven't really played like a super large amount in recent years. I did not know has been around since 1971. And it was one of those games where it's like, yeah, I remember playing that as a kid. And it's like, it's that old? What the hell? Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into these types of research episodes, and I genuinely love doing these topics because I ask like what sounds like a very simple question, and then I just go into a rabbit hole that I don't expect to come out of until like maybe weeks down. It's like I feel like I've done weeks worth of research in the course of like 4 hours.
Well, and to kind of wrap this up, I know the big question is going to be how long is too long, and I suspect the answer to that is going to be very complicated. And when I think about that, I think of 2 more series that you don't have on here, 2 more Capcom series in particular. I'm not going to mention them here because I want to leave you in suspense for next time, but I get it's where it becomes complicated to think about, has this gone on for too long? Or maybe another way to think about this, is it oversaturated? Are there just too many darn games?
No, and I think that's a fair question. That could also be part of that element in this question, because like I've talked about a little bit in the preview, is like, Pokemon has how many games, including spin-offs? Like, if you're not even counting just mainline entries and you're counting like the games on an individual aspect, because I think with the numbers I did for Pokemon, it counts each individual version as its own game. So it's not like Red and Blue.
Yeah, then it's a little inflated.
Okay, but still, the way that I'm viewing it is it's like, in the case of like Pokemon, if there are multiple games and there's different content to these, then this is going to be a different game in that aspect. Because like if you go and even as far as like Red and Blue, you only have certain Pokemon, and then you have certain ones in blue, you have certain ones in yellow, and so on and so on. It was designed by choice to make it so that there is a way that you can only catch Pokemon so you can trade with other people. That's why I count these games specifically as individual, Because if I don't count them as individual, it doesn't really illustrate my point with Pokemon, especially. You know, I can even like go as far as like with a lot of these spin-off games. Like you could probably kind of condense them into like subgroups to some degree even, but like at the end of the day, there's still how many individual games? Like it's still probably a larger number, even if you like compare like the generations. Like if you cut the generation games in half, like as saying like, oh yeah, these two are one whole game per se. Like Red and Blue is like one, and Gold and Silver is like two. There's still a lot of Pokemon out there. That's why I think that this is such an interesting topic, because it's like you want to go into like realizing it exactly how much of this actually is going to affect the franchise. And kind of going back to what you said, is it oversaturated? That very well could be, because I'm looking at some of the franchises I picked out. I'd make an argument yes. And then for some of them, I would say no. But that's a whole different concept of a question here that we'll get into next episode. But yeah, that's basically what I want to tease to. I'm very excited to talk about this, because this is a very more unexpectedly deep conversation I think that it's going to be.
And evidently previewing it here has brought up some more questions to think about last time. But we'll leave it there. Otherwise, we'll go on yet another tangent about this. And we're trying to keep it under 2 hours. And we're well under that right now.
It's okay. You're going to cut stuff out, apparently. So we'll be under the 2 hour mark. No problem.
Well, I cut things out in the sense of like, I like cutting out the freestanding ums, which I'm bad about doing, because you'll hear me do an right into the next word. That's something that you're really good at, is having the freestanding You're in a thought, and then even if you need to in it, it's like it stands on its own, and then I can just chop it out and then let the thought continue in a more smooth way. But that's another whole digression we could get onto, and I think we've kept enough time here already. But for those of you who are out there, those of you who have made it all the way to the end, you've got plenty of ways to give back to this little burgeoning show if you'd be so inclined. You can give it a like. You could comment on it if you really want to have it. Whenever you're ready to listen to it, you can subscribe or follow or whatever the proper word is on your platform of choice. And yes, I know I keep bringing this up every time. We will get that SpeakPipe page. I promise we will. We just haven't had time to sit down and decide, are we happy with the name or not?
We have not discussed that in a while, so maybe we need to go revisit that off episode at some point. I will say this, and I'm going to throw this out here. This is not something I passed by Brandon in the slightest. But what I would like to do at some point with our listeners is I would like for them to throw suggestions at us, because like we come up with a lot of suggestions on our own time, and like it can be difficult sometimes when it's like, you don't want to rehash on the same topics over and over again. So something that I would like to kind of encourage the listeners to do is send us some suggestions, whether it's in like the comments on, however you're listening to this. If there's like something, like eventually we're going to put social media pages, I'm sure, together for once we get the new account, or not the account, new name figured out for us. Put some suggestions in there. Like, what do you guys want to hear? We're just two guys on the internet at the end of the day who really enjoy video games. And I think at the end of the day, we want to be able to provide content that seems of interest, whether it's a really well-researched topic for both of us, or if it's something that's like a fly-off-the-cusp thing that we just found out literally like 15 minutes before we were going to shoot. We would rather be able to also give you guys content you genuinely are interested in. And, there are plenty of other topics when it comes to this sort of thing. We don't always think of every single avenue that this could go. So maybe if there's a real good topic like that Brandon really likes or that I like, we'll absolutely look into doing it. Maybe we'll do a down the road, once we have more of this actually pieced together and like all ready to go. Maybe we'll do a fan episode where we can take fan suggestions as our topics for that, and then just go and see what happens.
I was thinking like Q&A kind of deal could be interesting.
Well, technically, they're just providing the Qs. We're providing the As.
Well, right, but you get the idea.
And that can also be another thing. We can definitely do a Q&A episode, like where it's just more of us, I guess. But I think what I would like to see more of is let's establish the two-person show and kind of figure out what it is that people want to hear. I'm sure there are people who do want to hear interesting things about us down the road, but like I want to give them what they want to hear first. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you are here to serve an audience. You don't want to become audience captured because that can create some problems.
Can't
not necessarily
imagine
in
what
this type
you are
of show.
referring to in the slightest.
There's honestly there's a handful of things depending on what you consume that you can think of what I'm referring to. But I'm just saying you are there to serve the audience, but you're also here to make your own art. And so if the audience comes to you with what you have to say, that I don't know. I think sometimes that can be better. You got to stay true to yourself, man.
I'm not saying we can't stay true to ourselves. I'm saying that like I would love to be able to give a more like specific topic that people are excited about. Like, you know, once we get like a proper name change and once we get like a few more episodes, like I would say even like maybe we look into it near the end of the year. Let's see if there's like people who have like a topic that they want to listen to. Like we'll have plenty of episodes down there. Ideally, we will have a new name for the show and we'll be ready to like have more stuff where there's more, you know, audience interaction. That's what I really am excited about is I want to hear from you guys. I want to be able to find out what you guys are thinking about in the gaming sphere. I want you guys to be able to kind of come up with these like interesting topics where we'll sit down and we'll be like, you know, I've never really thought of it this way before. Because, like, gaming as a medium, and I will get off the soapbox after this, I promise. Gaming as a medium has become such an elaborate thing. Kind of going to, like, the comment you said about, like, are video games art? That is a whole other topic that, like, can be very, like, nuanced. But gaming is a very unique medium that is legitimately a thing that can be asked. Is it a thing to just do to pass the time? Is it a way to convey stories? Is it art? Is it gonna make you feel? Is it just there to make you upset? Like there are a lot of things that video games can do and that weirdly does them almost all a little too well in some cases. So like if there is a topic specific that you can think of, let us know. We'll look into it and we'll probably do this as an episode down the road if we don't think about it ourselves. We want people to feel connected with this show, I think, at the end of the day. And I think the best way to do that is to find out what you guys want to talk about, too.
All right. Well, very well capped off at the end there, I would say. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got here. So I think I'm ready to properly sign us out. I am Brandon.
And I am a confused individual.
And we are going to leave it out here. Thank you for listening, all.
Goodbye.